HR study showed that humble leaders are actually more likely to get promoted themselves. Why? Because they're talent incubators. They grow and build their people up, and as such, they become more successful leaders themselves. So who do I promote? I promote the people who build other people up. People challenge me sometimes on, as a humble leader, you're just weak. You're an emotional doormat. But no, to actually humbly invite feedback and share what I'm working on myself, I need to be fundamentally confident in myself, to have a fundamentally strong sense of self. Humility is not for the meek or the weak, so it is tough, right? So there's no two ways about it. We need to make ourselves uncomfortable to actually grow.
That's Urs Koenig. He's a former United Nations military peacekeeper and NATO peacekeeping commander. Now, he shares his message of radical humility through his work at the Radical Humility Leadership Institute. Urs has spent over 3 decades helping hundreds of leaders and executive teams unlock new levels of achievement. Here, he shares some of that wisdom also found in his new book, Radical Humility. So you'll learn 1, why leaders win more when they're humble, 2 tricks to getting better quality feedback, and 3, how to make any tough conversation less intimidating. I'm Pete Makaitis. This is How to Be Awesome at Your Job. And now, here's Urs.
Urs, welcome to How to Be Awesome at Your Job.
Thanks, Pete, for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Oh, me too. You know, I was a Model United Nations student in high school and college. So basically, we're the same.
So how's that, Pete? Tell me more about that.
No, there was no danger zones. We just sort of dressed up in Western business attire, as we called it, and argued over our resolutions and who was going to put their hands on the keyboard and go to the printer. But I want to hear you share with us a riveting tale from your work as a UN peacekeeper that kind of shaped some of your thinking on leadership.
So, well, 2 things, actually. So I went back to the military after having been out for 22 years. And so went back to serve as a peacekeeper, left the business, left my kids to volunteer to make a difference. On the second day of reporting to my peacekeeping command, I dropped my flak jacket. And the sergeant, 25 years my junior and well below my rank, is chewing me out for dropping my flak jacket. And I'm here to be of service, to make a difference. And this young punk is chewing me out. So it takes and that's the title of my book, all the humility I possibly can muster, not to make a snarky comment, but I pick up the vest and I say nothing at all. But it was one of the first lessons in humility I would have to learn over the next 9 months as a peacekeeper. Just a small one, but there were plenty more later on.
What I'm curious, Urs, did that gesture of humility have some positive impact for that relationship, or did you just never bump into him again?
No. I had to work with him later on for sure. And he ended up being a nice guy. You know, he was just posturing on the second day. But actually, so if I may, Pete, what then happened was I deployed into the peacekeeping mission and I opened my book with that story. We were escorted to a school play, an end-of-year school play. And escorted to the front as part of the peacekeeping force. And I sat down and we were treated to a reenactment of the Kosovo War. These are kindergartners, first and second graders, massacring their fellow students on the floor, shooting and shouting them to the roaring applause to parents, teachers, and other students. And so that was another lesson in humility. I thought I understood the conflict. I understood what's going on. But when I sat there, I'm like, you know what? I really still don't get it. When you think you get it in a conflict zone, something happens, comes out of left field like the school play, and you go, you know what? I still am a student here, and I need to ask bigger questions. So that was another lesson in humility that I learned through the peacekeeping work.
Well, yeah, I can imagine being in that scene, watching that unfold and just kind of scratching my head like, what is going on here? And what does this mean? And tell us, Urs, what was your takeaway from having witnessed that?
My takeaway was asking bigger and harder questions. So is it our role as peacekeepers to not just build peace in their cities, but also in their hearts? What stories do these kids need to be taught at home and at school so that this nation can actually transform into a peaceful nation? And so the more I learned, the less I understood, it seems, but the quality of my questions improved. And like, that's not no small feat. So that was a real takeaway. The same in the Middle East, a couple of years later. The quality of your questions improved, but you're always a student. You constantly need to learn, because being in a conflict zone like that is just a humbling experience in itself.
All right. Well, Urs, you put together some of your insights into a handy book, Radical Humility, Be a Badass Leader and a Good Human. Can you tell us any particularly surprising or counterintuitive or extra fascinating discoveries you made while putting this together?
The best leaders are actually deeply humble. In my personal experience, the best commanders in the peacekeeping force, they ask great questions. They're deeply self-aware. They let their team members shine, and they constantly ask for feedback on how to get better. And we can look at the corporate world. Microsoft, Satya Nadella, how he transformed the tech giant from the Steve Ballmer command control into what it is today, based on his own values, curiosity, constant learning, growth mindset, and humility. And so those are two examples.
Okay. Well, tell us, what's sort of the big idea or main thesis of your book here?
The main thesis is that to actually win in today's world, we need to be deeply humble. You know, leading in today's environment is by definition humbling. No one person can have all the answers. And so that is the big idea. The best leaders, the most successful leaders are actually deeply humble. It's not the show-off folks who win at the end.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, could you maybe tell us an example of someone that you got to see up close and work with who upgraded their leadership by adopting this radical humility approach? What were they doing before, and what did they do differently, and what results emerged?
One of the best commanders I've ever had in the peacekeeping mission, he opened one of the meetings we had in his office with these words. He said, "I love you, Urs. You know I do. And this is not even close to being good enough." So that's a deeply humble approach. So his words made me shrink in my chair, and I turned myself inside out then to produce the very best work I could over the next 9 months. Now, if the guy would have chewed me out, if the guy would have yelled at me, I would have tuned him out. But because he deployed a core element of humble leadership, namely strong relationship building, we had a very close relationship. He got me as a whole human being versus just somebody who did work for him. I knew he cared. He was supporting me in my career path. I was really able to hear and take in his message. So that's an example of radical humility in action, building meaningful collaborative relationships with your people while holding to the highest standards. I call that tough on results and tender on people.
Okay, cool. Well, so in your book, you mentioned 5 key shifts. Could you give us a quick overview of each of those 5?
Sure. So the first is dig deep. So that's the first pillar of leading with radical humility. It's deep self-awareness, really understanding. And that's what people think about when they hear humility, like seeing myself accurately, not having an overly low or high picture of myself. So that's deep self-awareness. What's tied in there is also the humility to know that I can't achieve everything, but I can achieve almost anything I put my mind to. So this the notion of focus. The second pillar of leading with radical humility is tough on results, tender on people. I just talked about that, holding our people to the highest standards while building meaningful and trusting relationships with them. The third shift is called lead like a compass. So this is getting out of the spotlight, empowering my people to execute at the front lines, getting out of the weeds, leading with my eyes on, hands off, and comprehensively delegating. The fourth one is full transparency. If we want our people to really be empowered to make good, smart decisions at the front lines, they need to know more. And the only way they'll know more is if we share more. And all the research consistently shows that we think we over-communicate as leaders and the message still doesn't get heard. So heard, 150 times, 7 different ways. And only when you hear your people paraphrasing back what you're talking about, then you're heard. What's also tied into full transparency is, and I write quite extensively about this, the value of vulnerability. Vulnerability is the quickest way to build trust with your teammates as a leader, as a peer, and as a direct report. So being transparent about my shortcomings and what I'm about to do about that, what I want to redo this, being transparent about my shortcomings and what I want to do about them. And the last shift is champion a fearless culture. There I'm leaning on Amy Edmondson's work on psychological safety, providing an environment where it's safe for anybody to speak up with questions and concerns without fear of being shamed or, worse, risking their career. So these are the 5 shifts of leading with radical humility.
Okay. Well, we've had Amy Edmondson on the show, and we've heard some of the cool research on psychological safety. Can you tell me, are there any other veins of research or data or experiments or studies that really make this stuff pop in terms of saying, whoa, this is not just your opinion, this is gold?
So there's a particular study I'd like to talk about, but there is actually research on how humble leadership transforms into better bottom line results. So there's plenty of academic studies, higher employee engagement, better relationships, healthier team dynamics, and ultimately actually better bottom line results. There was just an HR study published last week, which showed that humble leaders are actually more likely to get promoted themselves. Why? Because they're talent incubators. They grow and build their people up, and as such, they become more successful leaders themselves. So who do I promote? I promote the people who build other people up. But one particular study I'd like to talk about is this notion of vulnerability building trust. So there is this study where pairs of complete strangers are brought into a lab, and they're tasked for 45 minutes to ask and respond to meaningful personal questions, such as, what does love and friendship mean to you, Pete? And if you only had 1 year to live, what would you change? At the end of the 45 minutes, these complete strangers were asked to rate the level of trust they developed with their partner 45 minutes. When they responded, they rated the level of trust about as high as the level of trust they have with their average person in their lives. Some even rated it as high as the level of trust they have with their significant other. And I love this, one pair even got married. What the research shows is that even sharing for brief periods of time with vulnerability is an incredibly powerful way to build trusting relationships.
Okay. Well, could you demo some of this for us in terms of either these conversations or these questions? I guess it'd just be really nice to get a view of what does this humble leadership, radical humility stuff look, sound, feel like conversationally, as opposed to perhaps the average or the norm that we're accustomed to in our professional communication interactions?
It looks like asking for feedback. Pete, it's all simple stuff, but it's not always easy. At the end of every one-on-one with my team members, I ask for, hey, Pete, what do I do well as your manager? And what can I do better? Increasing our self-awareness by constantly asking for feedback. And we don't have to be a leader or a manager to do this. We can do this in project teams. We can ask our team members, what do you see me do well? What can I do better? That's one thing. Another piece is wanting to get to know my team members, or also on a project team, my teammates on a more personal level. Actually having a conversation about what's going on personally with their lives. So getting to know people as whole human beings versus just worker bees. So self-awareness by asking for feedback and deepening relationships. And, Gen Zs want this. It's all the research out there shows we want meaningful and trusting relationships at work. And some studies even show that those young adults actually value relationships and relationship culture more than they value salary and money.
Well, Urs, since you're an example for vulnerability, I'm just going to put you on the spot. When you've asked people these questions, what have they shared with you, and what changes have you made as a result?
I have been told that especially early in my career, that I was too rigid. I'm Swiss, right? Too organized, too structured, and not flexible enough, actually. And so that I needed to sometimes soften up a little bit and maybe look at things from a different vantage point versus just powering through the original plan. So that's one of the things I most definitely learned about myself.
All right. And how have you implemented that to become more flexible?
Well, what I do is, so Pete, you give me that feedback. What suggestions do you have for me to actually do this? Now, I have team members hold me accountable for it. So I say, okay, I'm working on becoming less rigid and more flexible. Give me feedback in the moment when you see me go down a rabbit hole and just stick to the original plan because we said we should, instead of asking, hey, what other options can we look at here? Or how might we approach this a bit differently?
Mm-hmm. And then tell us, if folks are asking for this feedback and folks are reluctant to give it, do you have any pro tips on how we can encourage that all the better?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. It happens all the time, right? So One of the options is to actually call it out explicitly. Say things like, hey, I know it can be uncomfortable, Pete, for you to give me feedback. I feel exactly the same way with my boss, but I actually see your ability to give me honest feedback as part of your professionalism. That's one thing, call it out explicitly. The second thing we can do is we can actually say, hey, Pete, I'm working on becoming a bit more flexible. What feedback do you have for me on how I'm doing with this? So instead of keeping it just open-ended, I make you give me feedback on a goal I already identified for myself. So that it makes it less threatening for the person to be honest about giving feedback.
Yeah, that's good. And I'm reminded of some of my work experiences where I've had folks, managers I've worked with, and we talked about some things I was looking to work on and learn from the project. And then they just flipped right around and said, okay, and here's what I've been working on. I was like, oh, wow. Okay. And it was just really cool to see, as well as, all right, well, hey, as we start working together, how about you chat with some other folks who've worked with me historically, and they'll give you a little bit of a sense of what I'm like to work with. And I just found those so striking in terms of like, oh, wow, like you are a human who is aware of that you are imperfect, and you have no need to try to hide that from me or show me how impressive you are as the big boss. And I just immediately respected them more from right off the bat.
I love what you're saying here. It's exactly that. So how many of us have bosses who are so arrogant and so full of themselves because they're actually deeply insecure, right? So I actually, people challenge me sometimes on, as a humble leader, you're just weak. You're an emotional doormat. But no, to actually humbly invite feedback and share what I'm working on myself, I need to be fundamentally confident in myself. To have a fundamentally strong sense of self, only then can I do, what your boss did as well. Or I'll humbly ask for feedback on what I can do better. I need to fundamentally be confident in myself.
That's right. You have to have some self-confidence and some courage. And so help us out, Urs. What if we don't have that yet? And we're like, oh my gosh, that sounds really cool in this utopian, happy work life world, Urs, but that's actually sounds kind of terrifying to me. How would you speak to those folks?
Start small. If you're concerned about asking your boss for feedback, or as a leader, you're direct, ask a peer, ask your best friend at work, right? So ask somebody who you're close with at work for some feedback, and start there and then build from there. And you know what? It's a contact sport. Humility is not for the meek or the weak. So it is tough, right? So there's no two ways about it. We need to make ourselves uncomfortable to actually grow. So in time, I would encourage and push everybody to just always take a step further than what you're comfortable.
These are cool examples, Urs. Can you lay some more on us in terms of transformational conversations that unfold in this radical humility style that you've seen go down? People talking and growing as a result.
Yeah. So one example I love is Brad Smith, the former CEO of the financial technology company Intuit. He's now president of Marshall University. He volunteered to his board to do a 360 survey. 360, as many of your listeners probably know, anonymously surveys everybody around your strengths and weaknesses as a leader. But he then shared his 360, which he volunteered with his board, but he sent the report to the entire company via email. So the anonymous feedback that he got back, he sent to everybody at the company. He even taped back then a copy to his office door. He even taped a copy to his office door for everybody to see. So what happens in the process? The top dog is sharing his shortcomings and strength with some vulnerability publicly, and in the process makes it safe for everybody at Intuit to start working on their own stuff as well. So that's humble leadership in action.
That's cool. Well, do you happen to know any of the spookiest elements on that 360 report?
I am sorry, I don't.
I've received a lot of feedback that I'm a total jerk and a toxic boss. Very helpful. Thank you. Thank you. Well, because you wonder, Urs, in terms of how much vulnerability is too much, or in terms of it's like, oh, shoot, we've uncovered some deeply troubling things here. I don't know if I want to broadcast that to the world.
Absolutely. So a couple of things there. So I often talk about humility in 3 acts. So the first act is me. The second act is what I'm sharing, maybe an insecurity, something I'm working on. And the third act is what am I doing about it, right? So Give me the 3 acts. Don't just talk about all the stuff you suck at. Go all the way to the 3rd act. And then the other piece is, there is definitely, this is why this is a thinking person sport, places and times where you share more and places and times where you share less, right? And so this is about reading the situation, knowing your audience, and in a one-on-one with somebody you feel close to at work, you probably reveal a bit more about your weaknesses than publicly in your first senior leadership management meeting. So it's situational is the best I can say here.
Okay. And with the notion of being tough on results and tender on people, I'd love to get your pro tips on if folks are so tender on people, they find it difficult to be tough on the results. They're softies and they realize they need to hold people to a standard, but they're very uncomfortable doing so. Any pro tips for them?
It's actually one of the most common mistakes people make when they hear my topic, when they hear about humility, when they hear vulnerability, like then they are too conflict averse and they think that it's not actually holding team members accountable. So identify the one tough feedback you know you have to give and you haven't given it, and go and do that. Just one tough feedback, identify it and go and give that.
All right, Urs, can you give us an example of a time you've done this and what you identified and what you said and what went down?
Well, I had, during my peacekeeping command, my first warrant officer was so nervous and so on edge that he endangered all of us in his handling of his weapon. So I had to let him go. And he was the nicest guy. It's really hard to do. He was so motivated, the nicest guy, but he just didn't have it in him. So I had to basically sit him down and in a very loving way tell him, again, I love you, Marcus. You're a great guy. You really try hard, but you just don't deliver. I cannot take you on my mission. You're not fit for mission. You're fired. That's it.
Okay. And then what did he say to that?
He cried.
All right.
He did. Yeah. But he accepted it and he had no choice. And to this day, we actually exchange WhatsApp messages.
So it sounded like he understood that what you said was the truth, though he didn't like it.
Exactly. I mean, and it's, management one-on-one, like this wasn't obviously the first conversation we had about this. There was a long process coming and lots of, in the business world, would call it performance improvement plans and whatnot. So, we had plenty of ongoing conversations around it. It wasn't a surprise to him at all. And it never should be a surprise. That's the other piece. When we give our people feedback in performance reviews or otherwise on a regular basis, if they're hugely surprised about the feedback, then you have not actually done your job as a leader. Because it should be an ongoing conversation, right? Not only asking for feedback, but also providing feedback.
And do you have any pro tips for the actual delivery of the feedback, do's and don'ts in that conversation?
Well, try to take the emotions out of it as much as you can. This is such a cliche almost, right? Center yourself, because often these things make us nervous, right? We're anxious when we have to deliver the feedback. So I actually use breathing exercises to calm myself down before difficult conversations like that. So whatever your technique is, and be in a good mind space yourself, be clear around your talking points, think about what the other person's reaction might be, have contingency plans, but be very firm on what you want the message to be and stick with your message.
Okay. And I am a fan of breath work. I actually subscribe to the breath work app. So Urs, what is your go-to calm down because I'm freaking out about this conversation breath protocol?
I actually go and work out. So that's the first thing I do. And that really helps me. So I go work out and then I do the 2-minute sitting meditation, basically, where I just focus on my breath. That's it.
Okay. And for the workout, are we talking cardio? Are we talking strength? Are we talking both? Are we talking intense? Are we talking light?
We're talking, for me personally, light cardio in that case, because I don't want to tire myself out. I want to still be ready. But the cardio is certainly, the research shows it over again, right? Helps to calm the nerves down and helps us to be centered.
And your light cardio is more intense than a leisurely stroll? Or where would you put that intensity?
Yes, it's a run or a Stairmaster or a treadmill, something like that. Yeah.
Big thanks to Urs for sharing his wisdom with us, and big thanks to our sponsors. Check them out.
One sponsor to check out is Harvard Business Review. This brilliant magazine, published at hbr.org, is the leading destination for smart management thinking. Fun fact, the Harvard Business Review has been mentioned in 108 episodes of the show. That's because HBR has so much great stuff, it just comes up all the time. They got explainer videos, podcasts, real-world case studies, and a whole lot more. I think of HBR each night that I put on my special orange sleepy glasses. Their article, Will Blue Light Glasses Improve Your Sleep?, revealed that those who wore them reported better sleep and a 7% improvement in work performance as compared to those who wore the sham glasses. So I cite HBR anytime anyone tells me that I look silly wearing them. Much of HBR is free when you sign up for a free subscription on their site, but to get unlimited content, that's $10 a month. If you visit hbr.org/subscriptions and enter the promo code AWESOME, you save 10% off of that subscription. Again, to save 10% off of your HBR subscription, go to hbr.org/subscriptions and enter the promo code AWESOME. All right. Well, now could you share with us a favorite quote, something you find inspiring?
Nothing changes if nothing changes. Unless we make small changes every day, the big changes won't happen.
All right. And could you share a favorite study or experiment or bit of research?
So I like the vulnerability research I just shared, and then the project Aristotle by Google, showing that psychological safety is the best predictor of a team's performance, more important than talent, more important than the size of the team, who's on the team, and so forth.
All right. And a favorite book?
My favorite book is Endurance by Alfred Lansing. It's about Ernest Shackleton's voyage.
All right. And a favorite tool, something you use to be awesome at your job?
I like the Johari window. The Johari window, which identifies our blind spots. It's a 2x2 matrix, basically.
All right. And is there a key nugget you share that is popular, resonates with folks you hear, quoted back to yourself?
People like the tough on results, tender on people. I get asked about that all the time, and that gets quoted.
All right. And if folks want to learn more or get in touch, where would you point them?
My website, urskoenig.com, or on social, I'm primarily active on LinkedIn, actually.
Okay. And do you have a final challenge or a call to action for folks looking to be awesome at their job?
Just ask. Ask for feedback. Just ask. And ask to get to know your teammates better. Just ask.
All right. Urs, this is fun. I wish you many lovely exchanges full of radical humility.
Thank you, Pete. That was fun.
I really resonated with Urs' point about with the humility, it doesn't mean you're meek or weak. Really, it's quite uncomfortable to go there. And in fact, we must make ourselves uncomfortable to grow. That's something I think I know, but I forget. And it's nice to be reminded of because it can actually transform those moments of discomfort, like, oh, this sucks, I hate this too. Oh, right, this is the sensation associated with growth. Okay, cool, let's proceed. I'm getting better. And this is just the unpleasant part of it that happens in this process. Great stuff from Urs. If you want to check out the show notes or the transcript or the links to items that we've referenced, please pay us a visit at awesomeatyourjob.com/EP975. Hope to catch you next time, and peace.